I want to welcome everybody to a tutorial series that I've wanted to do since I first started learning the basics of game development. In this tutorial, I will demonstrate the power of the Sfml library and what can be done in the C++ programming language with the right knowledge. Bear in mind that this particular tutorial only covers the absolute basics. The game we will be designing is not groundbreaking. It takes a lot of time, money, and resources to make a high-quality game. But if you want a solid understanding of the programming concepts it can take to make a game, this would be a good video to start with. Before anything, I want to make sure that viewers are aware that you have to do a bit of setup before you can actually start coding. First and foremost, I'm exclusively using Visual Studio for this. The version I'm using is Visual Studio 2017. I can assume that later versions such as 2019, 2022, and later will more or less have the same layout and configurations. Here's a quick disclaimer. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. I do have a number of years of experience in general game development, programming, and even modding, but I'm not an expert. I'm just passing along information that I know to be true with people that are still mostly unfamiliar with C++ programming or Sfml in general. Alright, I think I've talked enough. Let's get started. I'm afraid I'm not going to be explaining how to set up Visual Studio. There are much more comprehensive guides on YouTube that can show you how to do that. I'm going to be under the assumption that you already have Visual Studio installed and you already have a version that's compatible with the version of Sfml that I'm going to be using. Let's start for real. I'm going to show you how to get the Sfml libraries off the internet and put them on your machine and put them in an accessible place so you can use them in your actual project. The good news is that downloading Sfml is probably the easiest part of all of this. Just follow my instructions carefully. What you want to do is go to sfml-dev.org. Then you want to go to a section called Download. The most current version of Sfml right now is 2.5.1 at the time of the recording. That's the one you're going to click. It'll say latest version right next to it. When you're actually on the download page, you will be presented with several choices. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to clarify that I will be working with the 64 version of Sfml. If you have an older computer with a 32-bit processor, you'll want to go with a 32-bit version of the Sfml library. You want to make sure that you've downloaded a version that's compatible with the version of Visual Studio that you're using, otherwise it won't work, or will work wrong. I should mention that you will need a program such as 7-zip, WinRAR, or WinZip to actually open the archive once you have it downloaded. Once it's done downloading, go to your downloads folder immediately. It's usually a good idea to go ahead and copy-paste the Sfml archive that you've downloaded and move it to a folder on your hard drive in a place that you know you can find it easily. I highly suggest you go ahead and make a unique folder on your drive and label it for Sfml, and that way you can just find it immediately when you need to find it, and you can link everything up properly and quickly. Once you've got the archive where you believe it should go, you can go ahead and right-click it or uncompress it. Just right-click, extract all the files. But here comes the hard part. You're going to want to go ahead and start up Visual Studio, then go to File, New, and go ahead and start a new project, a local project. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're starting an empty C++ project with no pre-compiled headers. Next, you'll want to go over to the Project tab at the top of the Visual Studio menu and go down to Properties, and go ahead and click that. It can be very intimidating if you have no idea what any of this stuff is, but I will definitely be explaining it in this video so you don't get lost. First things first, go to the option that says Configuration at the top. Make sure it is set to All instead of Debug. This way you don't have to re-enter information if you decide to release your program later on. It's also just a good habit to do this anytime you're working with Sfml. so that changes are more generalized. We're going to start linking the library dependencies and the binaries that Sfml needs to work with Visual Studio. Assuming you still have the property tab open, you need to go over to the linker and expand it. For the time being, there are only two options that we're really worried about right now, the general and input tabs. First, you should go to general. If for any reason the project has link library dependencies set to no, you need to set it to yes. Close by should be a section that says additional library dependencies. You click the empty box directly next to it and you should see your text cursor start blinking. Then you want to go over to the drop down list right beside it and click on that, and then you will click edit. Go all the way to the top of the additional library directories window that just popped up. There should be something that looks like a new folder button up there. You want to click on that. It should allow the text under the box to be edited. Then you'll want to click on the ellipsis symbol, which is the three dots on the far side of the text field. By default, this usually opens a file selector that defaults to your project's directory. What you're going to need is outside of the project files. Do you remember how I elaborated that you need to put your Sfml files in an easy to locate area on your hard drive? Because this part is where that matters. Go to the folder on your hard drive where your Sfml folder is located. In my case, it would just be on the main hard drive under C in an obvious folder. What you want to do is open that up. Keep opening up folders until you see one that says lib. If you open one up and you don't see anything like that, you've gone too far. What you want to do is gently left click the lib folder and hit the select folder button. If you hit that, it should automatically set that folder as your library folder, and then you just hit OK and you've got it selected. There are only a few more things left to do. To access the rest of the option that you're going to need to finish this, you're going to have to create a basic .cpp file that will function as your main executable. If you haven't already, hit apply at the bottom of the property pages window and hit OK. Go over to your source files and right click. You want to add a new item. It doesn't matter what you call this file, but for convention's sake you'll want to name it either main or source. Once the file is made, a new option will be available to you under project properties. So just open that back up. You want to go to the newly available C/C++ tab. What you're looking for is under the general tab, or it may just appear if you select the C++ tab itself. Once you have the general tab open, you want to follow the same steps you did with file selection for .lib. But this time you want to make sure that when you go to the Sfml folder in your selecting folder, you select something called include instead. This will allow Visual Studio to find the include files to use the Sfml library. If you've been following these steps so far, the rest of this is relatively easy. Just make sure your configuration is still set to all. Go to your linker tab again, go to input, and click on the drop down menu next to that under additional dependencies. And this is where we're going to start actually directly linking the files to the project. You want to add sfml-graphics.lib. Then hit the return key, sfml-system.lib. Next one is sfml-window.lib. One after that is sfml-audio.lib. You may also want to add winmm.lib. And on the next line, openal32.lib. Having all of these guarantees that you have at least the most basic graphics and window functionality, and with the ability to also use audio if you need it. We're not going to be adding networking to this particular project, but it's not hard to figure out how to add that in here. Keep the properties window open on Visual Studio, but what you want to do is go over to your File Explorer, go to your folder containing your SFML files, open up the folder that says bin. you're going to need to copy every single thing in that folder regardless of you're using it or not. You just copy all of that and you paste it directly into your project folder. Make sure that you have everything copied directly to where your main file is, or whatever you're calling it. The point is that the program can immediately link it together and the libraries are functional with what you're trying to do. Alright, there's only one major step left. Making sure you still have project property pages is open. Set your configuration to debug. Go to linker and input and go over your additional library dependencies. You're going to need to edit them here. For every line that has Sfml at the beginning, you're going to add -d just before the .lib suffix. This way your program can be configured to select different libraries for debugging. Otherwise it won't compile correctly in debug mode. You only need to do this with the debug mode. If you alter any of the other configurations in the Properties tab, it could lead to a lot of problems later. I'll be explaining static linking for the release version much later down the line, but for right now just focus on the debugging. If you've done everything that I've explained in this tutorial, you should be good to go, barring some typos that can cause the libraries to break. It's very easy to mistype in your additional library dependencies. Please double check to make sure that everything is typed out exactly, Sfml dash and then the thing you need. It's graphics, not graphic, stuff like that. Little changes like that can be detrimental to a program if you've got them in wrong. And I know this by experience. So as long as you've got everything properly linked up, everything's in easy to find place, you've got your binaries copied, it should be possible to use Sfml with no problems here. In the next video, I'll show you how to actually use the Sfml library. I'm going to show how to do classes and stuff so that you don't have to have everything in main, and we'll go from there. I hope this tutorial has been helpful to you. Sfml can be a little tricky to set up, but it is incredibly powerful and I highly recommend it. Thanks.